Let's spend a few minutes reviewing the grouping and ungrouping functions in Microsoft Excel. The grouping function in Excel is useful if you'd like to group together a cluster of rows or columns. You can use it for both. This works well for structuring worksheets, which are large, and you want to have a summary view for presentation purposes. For example, if a spreadsheet is organized such that there are multiple monthly columns, you could group together 3 at a time and have a summary view for each quarter. Additionally, you could group together 12 months as a year. Rows can also be grouped together, which is similarly handy if you're working with a large data set and there is a logical way to summarize the data into categories with subtotals. Let's review how to group rows in Excel. First, select the set of rows which you'd like to group together. As you can see in the image shown on this screen, we've selected rows 8 through 13. Note that you should not select the row that you want to remain visible. In the example shown here, we want to group together the cash and banks rows, but we want to keep row 14 visible, which is a subtotal. Therefore, we highlight only rows 8 through 13. After selecting the rows, we go to the Data tab in the top navigation pane, and then select Group. After clicking Group, an outline will appear beside those rows indicating that the rows are selected and have been grouped. The plus and minus button on the left side of the row will allow you to collapse and expand the row at any time. To ungroup the row, highlight the rows and then go to Data and then select Ungroup. You can also create an outer group, which is really a second layer of grouping. This is useful for a larger set of data that has subtotals. For instance, as you can see on the example here, we have a subtotal for cash and banks, and there's a subtotal for cash on hand. And additionally, there's a total for cash on hand and in banks. And so the subtotal comes in handy, but also the outer grouping comes in handy if you want to collapse all of the cash. The way these work is independently. The inner group can be collapsed by itself, and the outer group can be collapsed as well, which would collapse the inner group if it's clicked. Let's take a look at this screenshot we have here, which shows the groupings that we have created on the tab Group and Ungroup -2. The Group and Ungroup -2 worksheet has multiple layers of rows and columns, which make it really important to have groupings. Otherwise, you may get lost in a flurry of data, and for presentation purposes, the subtotals are super handy, and having the groupings makes the presentation a lot more friendly to view. As you can see here, there is outer grouping that exists, and so we've really nested a bunch of groups inside an outer group, and that's particularly important when you have a ton of data and you want to summarize it for presentation purposes. So let's jump into the Group and Ungroup tab 2, and let's review how some of it works. So as you can see here, we've got multiple groupings starting with cash on hand, cash in banks, and an outer group for that whole subset of data called cash on hand and in banks. So if we were to click on the cash on hand minus sign here, it's just going to collapse the cash on hand. Similarly, cash in banks can be clicked with the minus to collapse it, and cash on hand and in banks, that can also be clicked to collapse. When we click the plus, it expands, and we can similarly expand the subtotals, subtotal groupings. You'll notice on the top left side here, we have a few numbers that appear as part of the groupings. What that represents is the different layers of groupings. If you wanted to show just a summary view of everything, you would click on the 1, and that automatically collapses everything. And then if you wanted to show the second layer down, you could expand everything in the view by clicking on number 2. And as you can see, we've got a third layer here that we've created. And so if I click on the number 3 button, it'll expand everything fully. Again, if we want to ungroup some of this data, we would just highlight some of the rows, and then we could go to the Data tab and then click the Ungroup button. As you can see, it did ungroup the cash on hand once, and I can ungroup it again. And if I wanted to bring it back into a grouping, I could just highlight everything up until, but not including, the subtotal, and then click Group. Additionally, if I wanted to group some of these columns together, I could just highlight a bunch of them up until the column that I want visible. In this case, I'm going to hide everything up until the adjusted balance column in column K. I'm going to leave the account title and the account code because I want those to remain visible, but I'm going to select columns D through J. I want to hide those as part of the grouping, and then I'm going to go to the top navigation pane, click Data, and then click Group. As you can see, the minus sign appears over adjusted balance, and if I click that, it's going to collapse the view. And so now I have a pretty clean view of just the adjusted balances between 2018 and 2017. In the top pane, I've got the option to expand everything fully using the click of that number 2. Alternatively, I can click the plus. And if I want a collapsed view of everything, I can click the 1 button that sits up here, as well as the 1 button that sits over here for the columns and the rows. And now I've got a completely collapsed view summarizing the data that I want to look at for presentation purposes. Hey guys, thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe from you. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel, check out these videos above. And don't forget to check out our website, commercecurve.com, where we have lots of in-depth finance and accounting courses available with full training workbooks. All of our courses come with complete workbooks of lessons, examples, pre-built financial models, and training video. Hope to see you there.